Okay, so in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to go through the process of planning and writing an IELTS Task 1 response, where the data you're given is a map. So I'll start with just a reminder of what's in IELTS Task 1, and then I'll discuss the system that I'm using in my planning and writing. I'll then move on and discuss how you plan this type of response with two different kinds of maps, and then I will demonstrate how you go through the writing process. So data might be a line graph, bar chart, pie chart, table, or it could be a combination of these different data sets, or it may be a non-data style question. Now there's two basic types of those. There are diagrams which often illustrate a process, and there are what we're looking at in today's video, maps. So you're given a map or a pair of maps, and you need to find a way to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So that's the sentence that appears with every IELTS Task 1 question, no matter what data they give you. And that summarizes what we need to do in this task. You need to summarize the information they give you by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons. Now, the system we're using here is designed to select features in a way that you can report them and make comparisons together. So many task 1s lose marks for task achievement because they simply list features that can be seen in the information. Firstly, we can see this. We can also see this. As well as that, we can see this. We can also see this. That may use fantastic language, but you're going to lose a lot of marks for task achievement because you're not recognizing the connection between the features you've identified. So the system we're going to use is going to plan by looking for three main features. Now, when I talk about main features, I don't mean the biggest thing or the smallest thing. I don't even mean the most dramatic thing that you can see. When we talk about three main features, you're trying to divide the information they give you up into three parts. Looking for ways to divide that information into three parts. Why three parts? Well, two of these three parts should be more closely related to each other than the other. So I'll show you how to do this in two maps in this video. How do you divide the information into three main features and two of them related to each other? Now, the reason for this is when we come to writing, we're going to write three paragraphs, but one of them is an introduction. So two main body paragraphs talking about three features together. That means the two features which are related will appear together in the same paragraph, and the other feature will appear in its own paragraph. That way, I'm showing the examiner not just that I can select features that are interested in this data, but that I can report them in a way that recognizes connections between them. I've put feature 1 and 2 together in the same paragraph because I can recognize they follow a similar trend or they demonstrate a similar activity. So the video will demonstrate how to plan by looking for three main features, two of them related to each other. Also, very important, you must have an overview. An overview is not an introductory sentence like the maps show the town of blah, 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 blah. No. The overview is the overall trend that you can see. One sentence or at most a couple of sentences which summarizes everything in the data. As you'll see, I'm writing three paragraphs here. One of them will be an introduction. Two of them will contain the main information I've looked for in terms of my three features. Two of those related to each other in the same paragraph. I'm trying to follow a system where first I describe a trend and then I use data to support the trend. Now, this is important because many people lose points for cohesion and coherence in IELTS Task 1 writing. So cohesion and coherence is how easy is it for the reader to follow what you're talking about. Very often, if you're trying to describe a feature you've identified by using data, it can be difficult for the reader to understand what you're talking about. So in this demonstration, I'll try and show a system where first you talk about what the feature is that you can see. You then back that up with data in the supporting sentences. Final thing to remember, in IELTS Task 1, you do not need a conclusion. Some people like to put their overview at the end of their Task 1, and that's absolutely fine. I always put it at the beginning because the overview is very important. You will lose marks if you don't have an overview. If you run out of time and you haven't written one of your features, that's not good and that will lose you marks. But if you run out of time and you haven't done an overview, that will lose you more marks. So I don't put the overview at the end. You may want to, that's fine. The important thing to remember is you don't have to have any kind of conclusion for IELTS Task 1. You can simply stop writing after you finish your main features. Okay, so here are two IELTS Task 1 questions which demonstrate the two types of maps questions that you can find. And you can see the difference between them is the first example has two maps of the same place at two different times. So you can see the key information we're looking for there is the difference between the two maps. The second kind of map question has only one map, but there are multiple locations identified on that map. Now, of these two kinds of IELTS Task 1 maps question, it's far more common to have a two maps of the same place at different times question, but you need to be prepared for a single map style question as well. First, let's look at the two maps question. Now, the first thing you need to notice here is the dates, 1995 and the present. That is super important because the examiner has just given you a big clue about the grammar they want you to use. If you're talking about the difference in something, in anything, between the past and now, you're going to use lots of the present perfect tense. You're also going to use lots of the passive voice with that. So examples of things that I can say here is the farmland has been replaced by a golf course. Or more houses have been built. Sentences I might say is a car park has been constructed near the hotel, for example. So when you've got a two maps question like this, make a mental note of the dates that you're talking about. Is it the past and present, or is it 2 points in the past? In either case, you're probably going to use a lot of the passive voice to describe the changes that have taken place. But if one of the maps is in the present, you are also going to use the present perfect passive a lot. Okay, I need to divide this information into three main features, and then I need to be able to identify an overall trend. Let's start with the overall trend. If we look at the town from the past to now, what are the main differences we can see? Okay, well, there's more housing now. Instead of farmland, there's a golf course and tennis courts. Shops are now restaurants. A fish market is now apartments. Now they look like they're on the beach. Those look like holiday apartments to me as well. A forest park has gone. Cafe's still there. And this is a big one, right? The fishing port has now disappeared. So how would you describe these two towns? For me, in 1995, what I can see is an industrial town with some tourism facilities. The fish market isn't for tourists. These shops are probably shops to serve people working in the fish market and the fishing port. There is a hotel. There's farmland here. This really feels like a place of industry. The people who work in this place are likely to work either in agriculture or in the fish industry. by now, in the present, the big changes are all of those big industrial areas have gone. We don't have farmland anymore. We don't have a fishing port anymore. We don't have a fish market anymore. All of that industry has left, and it's been replaced with facilities that really tourists want. Yeah. So holiday apartments, tennis courts, golf course, restaurants. Yes, more housing as well. Perhaps this accommodation is to house people who work in the tourism industry, or perhaps it is accommodation for people coming to spend their holidays in this town. So there is my overview. Overall, we can see now it's more touristy. It's not an industrial place anymore. Now, based on that, can we divide the main changes we've identified into 3 areas? Okay, well, as usual, when we're looking for 3 main features, there's a slightly more complicated way of doing it and a simpler way of doing it. And in most cases, it's better to follow the simpler way. A very advanced analysis here might identify different facilities and talk about those as the 3 main features. So one feature, for example, might be accommodation. And in that feature, you can talk about the fact that there is now more housing, the fact that the hotel has a car park, and the fact that there are apartments. So you could say one feature is the growth in accommodation. A second feature might be to do with places to eat. So you could talk about the restaurant and the cafe. And a third feature might be industry. So you can talk about the fact that farmland and the fishing port have gone. If you're going to go that way, then your 3 main features will be 1. No, in fact, we did the other round. Sorry. 1, accommodation. 2, like eating out. And 3, industry. Again, in this case, I'm going to talk about accommodation and eating out together in the same paragraph, and industry, because that's really the biggest change on its own in a different paragraph. But that's quite an advanced analysis, as I said, and there is a simpler way to do this, which perhaps will take you less time in your planning and give you more time to write. So another way which is simpler and probably going to give you more time to actually do your writing is to divide the map according to location, right? So we can talk about the western part of the city as one feature, the eastern part of the city as another feature, and the south part of the city as a third feature. Just have a look at that and think about which of those 3 features you would report together. For me, I would put 1 and 2 together and 3 on its own, because the disappearance of that entire fishing industry is a dramatic change in the city. So the way I'm going to demonstrate this is dividing the main part of the city into east and west as features 1 and 2, and then a third feature in a paragraph on its own describing everything that's happened south of that road which runs along the coast. Okay, so 1, west, 2, east, 3, south. Okay, but what about questions where I'm only given one maps? Well, in almost every case that I've seen, you are given 3 suggested locations. So those are the most obvious way to divide your 3 features. From my perspective, A and C would be the features that I talk about together, and B is the location which is far away from all of the other things. I would talk about that on its own. In terms of an overview, I would talk about the main thing linking these 3 suggested areas is their proximity to the city centre and to the airport. So in this case, my overview two locations close to the airport and city centre, and 1 location on the outskirts of the town. So 2 of the locations suggested are close to the city centre and airport. 1 of these locations is on the outskirts of the town. My 3 main features then, A, C, and B. I'm going to talk about A and C together and B on its own. So in every case, we're looking for 3 main features, 2 of them related to each other, and an overview. Once we've got that, we can start writing.